look at that feels like this could be big. Sen. Lisa Murkowski wrote Tuesday that SHES now behind the idea of scrapping Obamacare's individual mandate. Murkowski's office said that her opt-in the Daily News Miner should NT be viewed as support for the Senate's tax overhaul that's supposed to get a floor vote next week, as Pulse's Dan Diamond reports. But it surely can't be a bad sign, given that GOP leaders have yet to lock down the 50 required votes for the tax bill. Story continued below. The Alaska Republican said she'd review the tax bill more thoroughly over the holiday weekend, and stressed that she also strongly backed legislation to stabilize Obamacare's insurance markets. And keep in mind, the Energy and Natural Resources chairwoman has been working hard on a measure to open up drilling in the Arctic National Wildlife Refuge that would be combined with the tax overhaul. But is that a bird siren? The Penn-Wharton budget model will be out with new research this morning that projects that the Senate bill doesn't comply as currently written with budget rules governing deficits outside the 10-year budget window. The Byrd rule bans higher deficits in any given year outside that first decade, and Senate Republicans put expiration dates on all of their individual tax relief in part to meet that benchmark. But the Penn model estimates that the Senate bill will reduce net revenue in each year from 2028 to 2033. But wait, there's more. The Penn-Wharton budget model's take on the Senate bill became also just the latest projection to find that a GOP tax measure would pay for itself. The model found that the Senate bill would spur an extra 0.3% to 0.8% of economic growth between 2018 and 2027, but that it would also cut revenues by between $1.3 trillion and $1.5 trillion over the decade. Top Republicans, like Treasury Secretary Steven Mnuchin, have said the tax cuts likely would spur enough growth to keep from adding to deficits. Kevin Hassett, the chairman of President Donald Trump's Council of Economic Advisers, backed the idea of a self-financing tax cut on Tuesday, pro-tax Aaron Lorenzo reported. Given the CBO's forecast of a $28 trillion economy a decade from now, not a whole lot of growth effect is needed to make up foregone revenue estimates, Hassett said. He has predicted that cutting the corporate tax rate and letting businesses write off investments immediately would boost growth by 3% to 5%. GDP grew by 3% last quarter. A happy food coma eve to everyone, and safe travels to any of you who are sentencing yourself to long-distance travel today. This might be far less consequential than the 54th anniversary of the assassination of JFK, but it's also been 3 decades since a guy dressed like Max Headroom, remember him, hijacked the airwaves on a pair of Chicago television stations. That might not have been the golden age of television, but let's just say we've seen more compelling viewing. Anything happening, let us know. Email bbecker@politico.com, Teckett@politico.com, Baylor@politico.com, C. Wilhelm@politico.com, Alorenzo@politico.com. Twitter @BernieBecker3, @Toby Eckett, @Brian_Failer, @Colin Wilhelm, @Aaron Lorenzo, @Politico Pro, and @Morning Tax. Programming note: Morning Tax will not publish from November 23rd, November 26th. Our next Morning Tax newsletter will publish on November 27th. Please continue to follow pro-tax issues here. Good news, bad news: a narrow plurality of voters backed the House GOP tax plan, according to a new Politico Morning Consult poll, and support even ticked up after voters were told more details about the proposal, pro-tax Toby Eckett reports. Almost 40% of voters approved of the tax bill, according to the poll, with the other roughly 60% evenly divided between opposed and undecided. The downside: more than a third also expect to pay more taxes under the plan. But what about the economists? Only one top academic economist in the University of Chicago's IGM Forum said the GOP tax bill would give a substantial boost to gross domestic product. 22 said they either disagreed or strongly disagreed, and another 15 weren't sure. One more: a new poll released by the League of Conservation Voters found that a big majority of voters in generally marginal GOP House districts oppose the Republican tax plan and a proposal in Congress that will allow oil and gas companies to drill in the Arctic National Wildlife Refuge. Unintended consequences: the beginning Wall Street might have some objections to the GOP tax proposals so far. They do like the interest deduction, after all. But Bloomberg's Zachary Maida reports that there seems to be plenty of more hidden ways for the wealthy to enrich themselves in the Republican plans. Hedge fund investors look to be eligible for the House's preferential treatment of pass-through income, even though capital gains earnings were meant to be excluded, through what one lawyer described as an unusual set of drafting glitches. The House also proposes that private equity managers only get preferential carried interest rates on investments held for 3 years, not the current one, but lawyers say even that might be fungible. And while the House would repeal the estate tax in 2025, it leaves in place a related measure that allows heirs to sell assets without having to pay income tax on the appreciation that took place before they inherited them. Taken together, that means that a family whose fortune derives from a long-held asset, think Warren Buffett's Berkshire Hathaway, Inc., or the Walton family's Walmart Stores, Inc., might never have to pay tax on the bulk of that wealth at all. The founding generation could borrow against the stock to meet expenses, and the next generation could sell it income tax-free. Don't understand PAYGO? We promise you're not alone. Christina Rivero of Pros Datapoint has a handy chart of what could get hit, what would be exempted, and how the pay-as-you-go law could be waived if Congress passes a big tax cut. The Liberal Center for American Progress has also examined the potential consequences of PAYGO, noting that while the cuts to Medicare have gotten the most attention, funding for other programs could be zeroed out entirely. Examples include mandatory spending for Customs and Border Protection but not discretionary spending, an affordable housing program and a block grant for social services. CAP also found that PAYGO could lead to Western states losing out on oil, gas and coal payments that could crimp their budgets. That credit is, quite honestly, the sort of story that you might have expected more of this close to a tax overhaul. Interest groups worried about GOP efforts to slash or eliminate a cherished incentive. Patient groups are crying foul over proposals to at least limit the orphan drug tax credit, which is intended to help spur medications for diseases that affect relatively small portions of the population, The Hill's Peter Sullivan reports. The House would totally eliminate the credit, currently worth 50% the cost of research and testing, while the Senate would cut the credit nearly in half. Supporters of the incentive say cutting the credit will lead directly to a decline in the ability to treat rare diseases. The House Ways and Means Aide made the case that the bill's corporate rate cut and protection of the research and development credit would give plenty of help to pharmaceutical manufacturers, while a Senate Finance aide said tough choices have to be made. And a reminder, both the House and the Senate cut a relatively modest amount of preferences in crafting their tax bills. More advocacy. The Coalition for a Prosperous America, the American Sustainable Business Council and Sales Factor are buying full-page ads in places like the Wall Street Journal and the New York Times to push for using a sales factor apportionment system for taxing corporations. More on how that would work here. International update. Why be litigious? The Irish government doesn't want to have to go to court with Apple over the €13 billion in back taxes, Reuters reports. Both Apple and Ireland are appealing the European Union's original ruling in the case, which found that Dublin had offered the tech giant illegal state aid. We do not want to be in the situation where the Irish government has to take Apple to court because the European Commission is taking the Irish government to court. I think the message is understood and I'd anticipate progress in the coming weeks, Prime Minister Leo Varadkar said. State News. What's next in Jersey? Gov-elect Phil Murphy said this week that helps still interested in hiking taxes on the rich, even as a senior fellow Democrat. Senate President Stephen Sweeney has said the federal tax reform proposals could make that more difficult. Murphy says a so-called millionaire's tax would help pay for his plan to increase spending on education, transportation, and public worker pensions by $1.3 billion. He also proposes cutting corporate tax loopholes and legalizing and taxing marijuana to come up with the money, NJ.com reported. Quick links. The new Politico Money podcast featuring Nancy Cook, Brian Failer, Sung Min Kim and Ben White is all about tax reform. Real estate agents aren't backing down on the GOP tax plans. Corporate chief executives aren't as worried about the debt anymore. Singapore is warning its wealthy that it might soon see tax hikes. Did you know embassy officials from Slovakia and Slovenia in various countries reportedly meet once a month to exchange mail meant for one another? Mark your calendar. Politico is partnering with women-owned businesses in the DC metro area to offer a full week of exclusive perks in conjunction with the 5th Annual Women Rule Summit. Join the fun at participating businesses during Women Rule Week, November 27th to December 1st for exclusive deals, and tweet 5 times using Women Rule for a chance to win 2 free tickets to the summit on December 5th. Listen to the latest Women Rule podcast featuring glamour editor Cindy live here.